When power and dark psychology collide, what is happening right now? Something is happening right now that dark psychology researchers have been documenting for decades, and most people watching it unfold in real time do not have the framework to understand what they are actually seeing. This is not a political video. I'm not going to tell you what to think about specific policies or parties. What I'm going to do is give you the documented psychological framework that explains the behaviors currently dominating news cycles worldwide. Because what you're watching is not politics, it is psychology, and once you see it through that lens, you will never watch the news the same way again. Let's start with what researchers call the dark triad in positions of power. For decades, psychologists studying leadership have documented a disturbing pattern. The personality traits most likely to propel someone to the highest levels of power are the same traits most likely to make them dangerous once they get there. In a meta-analysis of leadership emergence, researchers found that charismatic authoritarians consistently rise to lead groups. The data from executive assessments show that many leaders carry elevations on dark side traits, with overconfidence aligning with narcissism and manipulation, overlapping with Machiavellianism being the most prevalent in positions of power. In other words, the system selects for the very traits that create the most risk. And right now, in April 2026, you're watching that dynamic play out in real time at the highest level of global power. Multiple former allies of the current United States president, people who supported him, defended him, and worked directly with him, have publicly stated in the past 2 weeks that his behavior has crossed into territory they describe as dangerous, unstable, or mentally unfit. This is not coming from political opponents. It is coming from former allies, including figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Candace Owens, and Alex Jones, as well as former administration employees, some of whom have raised the 25th Amendment as a potential response. CNN. From a dark psychology perspective, this moment is a textbook illustration of a specific pattern. What happens when the protective circle around a high-conflict personality begins to contract? Let me show you what that pattern looks like. The first behavior is what psychologists call narcissistic decompensation. Every person operating with significant narcissistic traits maintains a structure of external validation that keeps their self-image stable. Psychologists call this the supply network: supporters, loyalists, allies who reflect back the image the person needs to see. When that network begins to fracture, when former supporters start speaking critically, when the mirroring stops, something specific happens in the psychological architecture of a narcissistic personality. The defenses escalate, the behavior becomes more extreme, the need for control intensifies precisely because control is slipping. Dr. Ramani Durvasula has described this process in clinical settings as the narcissistic injury response. A perceived threat to the self-image elicits a disproportionate reaction to the trigger. The greater the perceived threat, the more extreme the response. What you're watching in current news cycles, the escalating language, the increasingly unpredictable decision-making, the statements that alarm even former supporters, fits this documented pattern with precision. This is not a political assessment. This is a psychological one, and the pattern does not care which party is involved. The second behavior is what researchers call the madman strategy. This one is important to understand because it looks like instability but sometimes functions as calculated strategy. The madman theory of foreign policy was originally articulated by President Nixon and his national security advisor Henry Kissinger. The core idea is that a leader who appears unpredictable and willing to use extreme force creates psychological leverage over adversaries. If your opponent believes you are irrational, they cannot accurately calculate your next move. That uncertainty produces compliance. Trump himself has articulated this directly. When asked if he would use military force against a blockade on Taiwan, he responded by saying he would not have to because President Xi respects him and knows he is, in his own words, crazy. So here is the dark psychology question that matters. How do you tell the difference between a leader performing instability as a strategic tool and a leader whose instability is genuine and uncontrolled? The answer is in the targeting. Calculated madman strategy targets adversaries. It creates leverage in specific negotiating contexts. It is turned on and then turned off. Genuine psychological decompensation targets indiscriminately. It hits allies as readily as adversaries. It escalates rather than resolves, and it cannot be turned off because it is not a performance. The pattern visible right now, behavior that has alarmed former supporters, statements made in context with no strategic benefit, escalating rather than stabilizing, maps more closely to the second category than the first. Again, this is the documented psychological framework, not a political opinion. The third behavior is what psychologists call the collapse of the inner circle. Every high-conflict leader maintains an inner circle of loyalists whose primary function is protection. They manage information flow. They absorb criticism before it reaches the leader. They maintain the narrative. When the leader's behavior becomes extreme enough that maintaining loyalty requires circle members to publicly contradict their stated values, the circle begins to fracture. The pattern playing out right now shows even former close allies publicly distancing themselves, with some raising constitutional mechanisms for removal. Congressional members have begun signaling they will not simply embrace every action without question. From a dark psychology perspective, the fracturing of the inner circle is one of the most significant observable signals. It means the protective buffer that kept the most extreme behaviors from reaching full public consequence is thinning. And when that buffer thins, the behaviors typically escalate further before they stabilize. Because the loss of the inner circle is itself experienced as a narcissistic injury, which triggers the decompensation cycle described earlier, it compounds. The fourth behavior is the weaponization of institutions. This is the behavior that dark psychology researchers identify as the most structurally dangerous, regardless of which individual is exhibiting it. Recent reports document the acting attorney general publicly defending the president's direct involvement in directing criminal investigations toward political opponents, describing this involvement as something Americans should be happy about, a departure from how most recent presidents from both parties have operated. In dark psychology terms, this is the institutional equivalent of what abusers do in personal relationships when they co-opt the people and systems around the target to reinforce the abuser's version of reality. The institution stops functioning as an independent check. It becomes an extension of the individual's will. And because the institution carries the authority of the state, the psychological impact on the population is amplified far beyond anything one person could achieve alone. Dr. Jennifer Fraser, whose research on institutional gaslighting was published in 2025, documents exactly this mechanism. She shows how gaslighting that is carried out by those in positions of power activates stress systems in the brain and rewires neural networks linked to decision-making, memory, and self-trust, not just in individual targets but across entire populations exposed to it. When institutions gaslight populations, the neurological damage is collective. The fifth behavior is what researchers call reality distortion at scale. One of the most consistent documented patterns in high narcissism leadership is the systematic redefinition of observable reality. Events that are documented, recorded, and verifiable get reframed. Statements that were made get denied. History gets rewritten in real time, and the volume and speed of the reframing is specifically calibrated to overwhelm the capacity of the audience to fact-check in real time. Researchers studying political gaslighting describe this as a war on perception. The goal is not persuasion, it is destabilization. When a population cannot agree on what is real, it cannot organize an effective response to anything. Gaslighting check. The psychological effect on individual citizens exposed to sustained reality distortion is measurable and serious. People report confusion, self-doubt, and a pervasive sense of helplessness. The clinical presentation mirrors what therapists see in patients recovering from prolonged gaslighting in personal relationships. The mechanism is identical. The scale is national. Now here is the most important thing I want you to take from today. What you're feeling right now, if you're feeling anxious, disoriented, exhausted by the news, unable to trust what you are reading, unable to predict what comes next, those feelings are not a sign that something is wrong with you. They are the documented, measurable psychological responses to the documented, measurable tactics being used. You are not losing your mind. You are responding normally to an abnormal environment. And the tools that protect you are the same tools this channel has been building across every video. Name what you are seeing. Maintain trust in your own direct perception. Limit your exposure to intermittent reinforcement cycles that keep your nervous system activated without resolution. Seek out sources that converge across different incentive structures. And remember that clarity, the ability to see the pattern clearly, is the most powerful protection available. Because the pattern is not new, it has a name, it has a documented mechanism, and it has been studied long enough that we know exactly how it ends. The next video is going to take everything from today and zoom out even further, to show you the documented historical record of what happens to societies that go through exactly what you're watching right now, what the research says about how populations survive it, and what the psychological recovery looks like at scale. That video is right there. Watch it next.